A love so distant and obscure remains the cure.
Day who knows what of quarantine. Doing a whole lot of the same stuff, watching the clocks tick away, cars drive down the street. I've even taken up some weird hobbies like exercising or reading. As you can tell, I was becoming truly depressed. You start to appreciate the little things in life, things that you could get before easily, but now you can't. But just then, everything changed. Finally, a project that wasn't labeling a microscope, but what to do it on. I pondered until I could ponder no more, because this had to be good. I even asked some trusted members of my family.
Hey, what should I do for my climate change video?
I don't know, go away.
The wisest member of my family didn't know what to do, and neither did my dad. I was stuck.
Feeling hot, hot, hot. Feeling hot, hot, hot. Feeling hot, hot, hot. Feeling hot, hot, hot.
Still unsure of what to do for my project, I reached out to some trusted friends for some advice.
Why can't you be more normal?
Why are you so weird?
Why are you the way that you are?
Literally nobody cares.
You're exhausting!
Sure. Why can't you be more normal?
I was devastated to be betrayed like this, but after I took some time to let the wound from the knife in my back heal, I realized something. Have I ever been someone to make a project that won't make the entire class simultaneously think, cringe, and laugh? No, absolutely not. So I did some research on my trusted source Wikipedia and found that one thing is constantly praised for being environmental: the electric car. The answer had been in front of my eyes the whole time. Since we needed a guiding question, I went to the questioning grid to make sure I worded it in a way that fit in the green section, and I came up with the following. How might electric cars be contributing to climate change?
To understand why electric cars are bad for climate change, we first have to understand why all cars are bad for climate change. As you know, climate change occurs when greenhouse gases like methane gas or CO2 trap infrared radiation in the atmosphere and re-radiate it back down to Earth, making it hotter. The gases also mess with our jet streams, which allow unusual temperatures to be prolonged for long periods of time. This is information we already know, so what we have to look at is why cars are emitting greenhouse gases. While two of them are commonly forgotten, there are three main times a car emits greenhouse gases: production, while it's actually being driven, and disposal.
Starting out with production, there are vast amounts of emissions from the manufacturing process of a car. All of that mining and all of the energy used, that adds up to a lot of emissions. I'll get into more exact numbers on this later on.
The most common way we think about cars being greenhouse gas emitters is through the tailpipe right here. When gasoline is burned in a car's engine, that releases a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere.
And then of course there's disposal, because all those materials have to go somewhere once the car can't be driven.
So now that we understand why cars fit into climate change, let's continue investigating why electric cars might not be as great as we thought they were, and what our best solution for the future is. We're at the point in the show where I should probably give you a little bit of information about why electric cars could be bad for climate change, or else Miss Graham's going to give me an F before I even get a chance to state my case. Once produced, electric cars are great vehicles, but unfortunately there's a dark side. It turns out the production of an electric vehicle's engine is so bad for climate change that we have to factor that in as well for its lifetime emission. According to German research agency Joanneum Research, if you were to take an electric car and replace the engine with a diesel engine, the lifetime emissions of the electric car wouldn't be less than the diesel engine until after it's already been driven for 219,000 kilometers. According to the same study, the average electric vehicle in Germany, where the study was conducted, only lasts for 180,000 kilometers. Now, when you consider our weather in Canada, that's likely lower here. It's important to note this wasn't just some random research agency doing this study. It was supported by the Austrian Automobile Association and ADAC, which is another German research group dedicated exclusively to car research. Now, I'm no math expert, but that's a 39,000 kilometer difference. Does that mean that diesel engines could be better than electric vehicles in the long run? Keep watching as we investigate further into this fascinating issue. And keep in mind, we're not trying to bash electric vehicles, we're just trying to find answers.
Surely, if even my seemingly nice friends could treat me as awfully as they did, then no car could be as perfect as the electric car. So I decided to go out for a walk and meet an electric car owner in the neighborhood. I was able to locate the proud owner of a Toyota Prius, but unfortunately they wouldn't talk to me because it's the middle of a pandemic and I was holding a bag of dog feces from earlier in the walk. Luckily, online, I was able to find the phone number for a Tesla dealership in Oakville, so I gave them a call.
Thank you for calling Tesla. Please press 9 if you know your party's extension. For address information, press
After
1.
navigating their answering machine for about 5 minutes, I gave up, so I decided to abuse the social media platform I created in the 6th grade by creating a fake TV show where I would showcase people who have very eco-friendly lifestyles. For an opportunity to be on my fake show, I asked prospective movie stars what the reasoning was for them getting an electric car. The first few had good, responsible, environmentally friendly answers, but the last person gave me exactly what I needed.
Another source I found, the Institute for Economic Research in Germany, found that when you factor in the production and the German energy mix, electric cars actually emit 11 to 28% more than their diesel counterparts. I should explain that a lot of my sources are from Germany, because Germany recently passed a law that's essentially going to require everyone to have an electric car by the year 2030, so there were a lot of studies done on this to make sure that this was the right thing to do. Many studies, even government ones that they did, found that the electric cars weren't necessarily the solution that they needed, but the government went forward with them anyways because that seemed like a popular thing for them to do, and it created a really great environmental image for them. Sometimes we have really good intentions, but we just have to make sure we're actually doing the right thing for the environment and not just for our own image. That's why earlier in the show I was so interested when the person on my fake TV show said that they bought an electric car so that they looked like a more environmental person. We have to actually do our research to see what's truly going to save the Earth. Climate change is the greatest crisis facing our generation, so this is not the time to just be building your own status as opposed to actually saving the Earth.
I'm not going to get too deep into explaining this chart, but don't worry, I've got lots more charts coming your way. What I want you to notice about this one is how wide the range of data is. This is a table showing 11 different studies on how much CO2 is produced in the production of an electric vehicle per kilowatt hour. As you can see, the results range from 30 kilograms to a much greater 250. That's why I'm always trying to use reliable sources, but I want to be clear that these numbers really show how unsure we are about what kind of impact our vehicles are having.
Since we don't really know what the cars of the future are going to be to save the Earth, it's really just a shot in the dark. Through some research on sources better than Wikipedia, I found the average electric car charge lasts about 100 miles, or 160 kilometers in Canadian terms, which is about the distance from Barrie to Peterborough. This means that if the average electric vehicle is lasting for 180,000 kilometers, and we divide this, then it should go for about 1,125 charges, give or take.
This number only makes sense if people wait until their car is at absolute zero to charge it, so I decided to go back to the people from my fake TV show and ask them when they tend to charge their car.
What I found is that people like to charge their car at two main times, overnight and at work, aka when it's convenient to them, not when the car is actually low on charge. People charge their electric cars very frequently because of their short range, so they're worried that they're going to run out very quickly. But unfortunately, this is just detrimental to the lifespan of that electric vehicle, meaning we're going to have to produce even more, and they're never going to make it to that 219,000 to make them beneficial. Currently, the United States gets 64% of their energy from burning fossil fuels. A study from the University of Michigan found that in the United States, with their energy mix, an electric car would emit approximately as much as a car with a fuel efficiency of 55.4 miles per gallon, and that's without the harmful production of the electric car batteries. In comparison, the study found that with China's energy mix, the electric car would be comparable to about a car with a fuel efficiency of 40 miles per gallon, which is about a Honda Civic. Now these are still pretty good numbers. 55.4 miles per gallon is really good, but the study specifically states that it doesn't factor in the harmful production of the electric car batteries, which would make the electric cars look a lot worse. Michigan University is a pretty reliable source, but they're not alone. Every single big prestigious university that's done studies on electric cars have found similar findings, like this one, and this one. Wait, that's not right.
Sticking with the trend of using American universities as sources, this is a chart from a study by MIT, which many rankings places the best university in the world. As you can see, the electric car on the left produces by far the most CO2 in its production stage. It then produces more emissions in its lifespan than the gas-powered Mitsubishi Mirage, which is a similar size. It does produce more carbon dioxide than the BMW, as sports cars tend to be a lot less environmentally friendly. Something to note here is that this is when the cars have been driven for 270,000 kilometers in the US, and electric cars just simply don't last that long. Since they don't last as long, we have to understand that the high emission totals in the production and disposal of an electric car are even more important than it appears, because we just have to make more and more of them.
Car companies are all trying to get in on the electric craze right now, but they're starting to realize that maybe their electric vehicles aren't as good for the environment as they thought they were. For example, Volkswagen found that their e-Rabbit electric car actually produces more greenhouse gas emissions than their diesel Rabbit car. And if there's anything we've learned about Volkswagen, it's that whatever they say their emissions is, we can probably multiply it by like 6. We also have to consider that energy isn't always cleaner than burning fuel. A study by the California Energy Commission found that, forget about manufacturing, just driving an electric vehicle that's powered by coal produces 10% more greenhouse gas emissions than a gas-powered vehicle. The production of a vehicle's engine accounts for about a quarter of its lifetime emissions, and making a hybrid engine takes 10 times more sulfur oxide into the atmosphere than that of a gas-powered car. That's a big jump!
This chart takes into account the manufacturing of an electric car's engine with several different countries on their energy mix for what an electric car's miles per gallon would be comparable to a gas-powered car. What this means is that in India, where their energy is largely supported by coal, it would be similar to driving a car with a fuel efficiency of 20 miles per gallon. But in Paraguay, where it's mainly renewable energy, it would be equivalent to driving one of 218 miles per gallon. There's 3 different columns in the chart because we don't actually know exactly how much energy is used in the production of electric cars. So as you can see with Paraguay, it could really be as little as 131 miles per gallon, which is still a lot, but it's a lot less than 218. To give you an illustration, I went out and found some cars that have similar fuel efficiency to the relative fuel efficiency of electric cars in different countries. Taking into account the energy sources of different countries, your carbon footprint driving an electric car would be similar to this gas scooter in Paraguay, this dirt bike in Canada, this stalker van in Germany or Russia, this sports car in the United States, and it would be about half of a rocket ship in India.
Electric car batteries are composed of rare earth metals, which are normally imported from China. For example, Tesla imports so much from China that during their trade war with the United States, their stock dropped 46.4% just because they couldn't get the metals that they needed for their batteries. There are some clear problems with this. First of all, we have to ship those metals all the way from China over to America. Secondly, those metals are not being mined in a sustainable way there because their rules are much more lax than ours here in North America. The Chinese government has actually admitted that these practices are not sustainable and they're destroying farmers' fields in the neighboring area. And that's the Chinese government admitting this. So let's watch this quick video that I compiled to show the mining process for these rare earth metals in China.
First, the grounds are cleared using an unknown method. There's then acid poured on the ground in order to dissolve the metals, which are brought on a boat over to America. They're sold to an American businessman, specifically in this case Tesla, for the tall price of a package of jelly beans and a Starbucks gift card. While the Americans are then getting rich off of their money, the farmers beg for their fields back because they're getting destroyed, but the Americans show little sympathy. And that's basically how it works. This graph was put together using data from federal government sources such as the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in the United Kingdom, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and the International Energy Agency. The graph shows the grams of CO2 per kilometer for average electric cars in different countries. Countries near the top like India depend heavily on fossil fuels, while countries near the bottom like Iceland depend mainly on renewable energy sources. This graph greatly proves how the benefits of an electric car depend greatly on the energy source used to charge their batteries. I went through these numbers and found a comparable vehicle for each country's emissions for an electric car. For example, Iceland, with their 70 grams per kilometer, would be about this smart car. Canada, with their 115 grams per kilometer, would be about this Harley Fat Bob motorcycle. The United States has 202 grams of CO2 per kilometer, which is comparable to about a Ford Galaxy or a Toyota RAV4. Shockingly, with Australia's energy mix, an electric car would produce about 292 grams of CO2 per kilometer driven, which is about this Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. Finally, last but certainly least, is India, with 370 grams of CO2 per kilometer, which is somewhere in between the U.S. Army HMMWV and the beloved monster truck El Toro Loco.
A study by the Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership went out and found the exact gap between the emissions in the production of an electric vehicle versus that of an internal combustion engine vehicle. What they found is that producing an electric vehicle produces 8.8 tons of carbon dioxide in production, while doing a gas-powered vehicle only takes 5.6 tons. The whole reason why electric cars are so much more harmful to produce is that you need to make a battery as well, which accounts for 43% of the emissions in production. I mentioned earlier on that for a gas-powered vehicle, production accounts for about a quarter of its lifetime emissions, but for an electric car, that's a staggering 46%. This study found that even with the higher emissions in the production of an electric vehicle, they still outperform internal combustion engines in the long run. One of the questions I was supposed to answer in my presentation was what different countries are doing to deal with my selected issue. But given my unconventional topic, this is a very interesting question, because countries are actually using the very thing that I'm breaking down in order to combat the emissions from vehicle transportation. So what are different countries doing in regards to the automobile industry anyways? 4 countries have very lofty goals in terms of getting electric cars on the roads to replace gas-powered vehicles. These 4 countries are the UK, France, India, and Norway. Let's head over to some of those countries now to see what those goals are. Here in the United Kingdom, the sale of diesel and petrol automobiles will be strictly prohibited by the year 2040, and blimey, that bloody rubbish will be completely off of our streets 10 years following.
Bonjour. Ici en France, we are following the policy of our British amis by banning the sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2040.
Welcome to Norway, where 40% of our cars are already electric, yeah? But we plan to make that 100% in just 5 years, by 2025. I'm not going to do an accent for India, because I feel like that would somehow manage to be more racist than the rest of them, but just know that they plan to be fully electric by 2030. At least 10 other countries have set goals for electric car sales, and these countries include Austria, China, Denmark, Germany, Japan, Ireland, the Netherlands, Portugal, Korea, and Spain. Here's an interesting factoid for you. Did you know that 95% of the world's electric cars are sold in just 10 countries? Can you guess what those 10 countries are? Probably not, but here they are.
Norway, the UK, Germany, Japan, Canada, the US, the Netherlands, China, France, and Sweden.
So forget about countries for a second. What are different companies doing to negate the lesser-known issues for climate change of electric cars? Toyota and Nissan have actually recognized the issue, and they've installed their own renewable energy generation plants with solar and wind energy at their electric and hybrid car production facilities in order to offset the emissions. Pretty cool, huh? One of the key environmental issues for electric cars has always been their disposal, as if not handled correctly, the toxic chemicals from the batteries could contaminate the nearby soil and water. This is leading to issues of not just emissions and climate change, but also soil and water, which is just as bad. Fortunately, what we found is that once electric car batteries aren't usable in cars anymore, they still have 70% of their electrical capacity left. Fortunately, companies are starting to realize the economic and environmental potential of this. For example, Nissan has been using their old electric car batteries to power streetlights in Japan. Renault has been using theirs to power elevators in Paris. And GM uses theirs to power their very own data facility in Michigan. Some other found uses for old electric car batteries include to power electric bikes, home electric storage units, and power tools. Once the batteries have been completely exhausted, we have to try to extract the raw materials from them. But unfortunately, for most of the world, the only way of doing this is through the smelting process.
Smelting is when the metals are melted down and separated. This is fine for metals like nickel and cobalt, but for the lithium in the batteries, we can't actually get pure lithium from this process. The process to extract pure lithium is so expensive that the value of lithium you only end up with is about 1/3 of what you spent to get it. In other words, it's 5 times cheaper to just mine new lithium out of the ground. With this being the case, most of the lithium just gets disposed of in unenvironmental ways.
Fortunately, a Canadian company called Li-Cycle has found a way that you can actually extract 100% of the lithium from it, but most of the world doesn't have this technology yet. So as with most of the things I've talked about in this video, it's just going to take a little bit of modernization for all of these things to actually be beneficial for electric cars. So that's a lot of information. A lot of it pretty damning to electric cars, really. But that leaves us with our final and perhaps most important question. What's our best solution for the future? I'm not going to get into great detail about them, but I thought I should mention one vehicle option that I left out of this presentation, which is the fuel cell vehicle, which is a car powered by hydrogen. They're often praised for being pretty environmental. The problem with this is getting hydrogen in its pure form, which 95% of the time is done with methane reforming, which produces high amounts of emissions. Also, we just don't have any infrastructure for them, as there's less than 45 hydrogen refill stations in the entire United States. So fuel cell vehicles don't seem to be our best option right now. A lot of my evidence has pointed to diesel cars being the supreme option right now, but the problem with them is that they have a lot of issues besides emissions, and in their current state, they're really not good enough to combat climate change long term, and there's not a lot of room for improvement. Then there's good old gasoline, which we know isn't a sustainable way of doing things because it's how we've done it forever. Burning fuel just isn't a sustainable way for the future. I don't consider myself a pessimist when it comes to electric cars. I just like to ask questions. I do in fact believe that electric cars can be our best option for the future, for individual long-distance transportation. We can talk all about public transit and bikes, but we're going to need cars as well. With that being said, electric cars aren't good enough in their current state, so a few changes need to be made for them to be our best option.
First of all, we need our energy to be better than burning fuel. Renewable energy sources simply have to become more common, or else we get situations like India. Infrastructure needs to be built for wind and solar energy, and hydro is still a preferable option as well, and it is one that we have a relatively high amount of infrastructure for, especially in Canada. Secondly, we need modern innovation to improve our electric car batteries. With the batteries lasting for the somewhat short amounts of time that they do, we have to produce and dispose of many batteries, which is not helping the issue. This chart shows how different improvements to the batteries can cut down on electric cars' emissions. Notice how beneficial some of these small changes can be. Thirdly, we need to institute sustainable mining practices for the rare earth metals, and the sustainable low-emission disposal processes for the batteries and the metal must become more widespread. I don't want to make this a political or ethical discussion, but I should mention that it's been proven that Tesla gets the cobalt for their batteries from mines in the Congo, which employ children, and only pay them about the equivalent of $1.50 per day of hard labor. Finally, the production process of electric cars need to be streamlined. We need to invest in the development and research of environmentally friendlier manufacturing methods in order to maximize the benefits of electric cars.
So we've reached the end of the show. I hope you've learned something valuable about the impact electric cars have on climate change, how it impacts specific countries, and what our best solutions are going forward. It's estimated that in the next 20 years, 1/3 of our cars are going to be electric, so let's hope this is the right thing to do. Tune into next week's episode where I provide conclusive evidence that the Earth is flat. I'm kidding, obviously. See you later.